Good afternoon and welcome to the NCSN in Chester. Today we're going to run the third of our webinars for 2015. Today's event is entitled Reducing the Fear of Crime, and we'll be concentrating on the use of technology in supporting effective crime prevention. I'm pleased to welcome one of the NCSN's commercial member companies, SelectaDNA, on today to discuss their services, the technology and their products. We will discuss the support and service they can provide to your organisation and to your partners. I will now ask James and Nick from Selecta to introduce themselves and give you a bit of background to their roles within the organisation. James, if you want to start.
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is James Brown, Managing Director of Select Security Systems, who are the manufacturer of SelectaDNA, the forensic marking product that we're here to talk about. I've been with the company for, since 2002, so coming up to 13 years. And during that time we have seen quite a change in the market of property marking, mainly the introduction of our forensic marking product SelectaDNA in 2005. So very much looking forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Hi, my name's Nick Roach. I've been with the company for just 2 years, or coming up to 2 years. Prior to that, for 30 years, I've been a police officer with the Metropolitan Police, retiring as a Chief Inspector, where I was in charge of all reported crime in London. My role within the company is that I liaise with police forces both in the UK and sometimes a little further afield. I do training and I deal with exhibits that come in or advice on how to retrieve our product, or if indeed it is our product.
Okay, well, thanks very much, chaps, and thanks for travelling up country today, a cold day in Cheshire today to be with us. If I could ask, I think it would be useful for the members to start off with, you could talk a bit about your products. So obviously if we could, we start sort of talk about your domestic products for domestic, homeowners.
Yeah, I'll kick off. So we refer to it as the property marking product. So as Andy alluded to, it comes in two different formats, one for domestic use and one for commercial use. The only real difference between the two is the amount of solution that you get to apply to property, and also the type of signage you get. So with a commercial version you get outdoor signage that would be more useful to put up at entrances to commercial organisations or schools or hospitals or whatever it may be. The solution for domestic users, which we supply in quite large quantities to police forces and local authorities over the UK and abroad, consists of a small bottle of liquid with an applicator, which enables you to just dip the applicator in and brush the solution onto any item of property. So it takes literally a matter of 1 or 2 seconds to mark an item, and then with the solution you also get a selection of warning labels and window stickers to go onto property, but most importantly to go up in front windows of properties to alert criminals to the fact that you've taken steps to mark and protect your belongings. In the larger scale campaigns that we carry out with police forces and local authorities, you also have street signs that go up onto lampposts to warn criminals that they're entering an area where the product's in use, and really that is the key point here, is advertising the fact that the product's being used, because without that it wouldn't be much of a deterrent. So the deterrent value comes in the signage, the window stickers and all the other marketing aspects that feature in a campaign, which might be billboards or posters at bus stops, for example. So the kits come the solution comes in a small kit. It's very quick and easy to do, suitable for homeowners to mark property themselves. Once they've done that, their details are collected by the PCSO or the officer who's handing the kit out. That would then come back to us by means of a spreadsheet, and we would automatically upload that onto the database to ensure that each individual code that's in each home relates to a particular individual, so that in the event of it being lost or stolen and recovered by the police, it will link back to the original owner. So that's kind of a brief overview of what the product is and how it works.
You mentioned particularly the marketing. How important is the marketing really, to the success, obviously, to public safety, I suppose to reassurance in the community?
Yeah.
How important would you say the marketing is?
I think we always say that the marketing aspect is definitely as important as actually physically marketing your property, because without that, as I said, you don't get the deterrent value of the product, and it's really getting the word out there, not only to members of the public to make them feel more secure and safe in their homes and in the area they live in, but most importantly to alert criminals to the fact that, look, if you continue targeting properties, if you continue carrying out burglaries in this area, you're going to be in trouble, because items are marked and the police can easily link those items back to the original owner and secure convictions.
Yeah. I suppose really, that's sort of getting into the psyche, Nick, isn't it, of the criminals, because obviously they want the benefits, they don't want to be caught, so it really is sort of planting that seed in their minds.
Absolutely. You need to think about criminals as kind of businessmen. They aren't stupid people. It's kind of, all about risk, and you really want to push them down the street. So if they start seeing these signs on your property or your neighbour's properties, they're going to move away, because they know the power of it. They visit our site, they do their research, as any sensible person would, and they know that with this product, if they were stopped by a police officer, that police officer can know instantly if that's stolen, because of the way that the product works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Interestingly enough, James, you mentioned police officers and PCSOs. There's no requirement for this just to be taken on by a police force. We could look at sort of registered social housing providers or local authority members. Those organisations could lead on an initiative. Obviously in partnership with the police, but they could lead. Their officers could do the same sort of checks.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that you're quite right. That phase can be carried out by those type of organisations that you mentioned, even neighbourhood watch groups. But it is important that the police are aware of any campaigns of this sort, so that you can ensure that they're carrying out their side of the bargain, if you like, in terms of checking property that's coming into custody in property stores.
Yeah.
Because without that, again, the deterrent value of the product is lost, because criminals need to know that the police are checking property and checking them for traces of the solution.
But from your organisation's perspective, you're willing to work with those agencies, yes?
Absolutely, yeah, and we have done on many occasions in the past, worked with housing associations, local authorities. One of the biggest campaigns that we carried out in the UK was with Swansea City Council, where they marked 14,000 boilers in the big amount of properties, which resulted in huge reductions in theft of boilers. So yeah, we've got many examples of working with RSLs and housing associations and local authorities.
Yeah, that strikes me as a really good idea. I'm thinking, sort of suppliers of boilers going onto sites, and I know when there's building work taking place now, they work their lead in time to make sure that sort of equipment is on site for the least amount of time before it actually goes in to the properties. Or maybe
Absolutely.
Those sorts of people marking them up beforehand, because obviously there's a huge impact when they're stolen from sites and so on.
We've even heard of organised gangs going around and actually giving residents money and saying, go out shopping, and so they can go and nick the boiler, and when the residents come back, there's no boiler, and they just report it as a theft. So there's some worrying crimes out there, but a product as straightforward and economic as a forensic marking product like SelectaDNA can really help.
Yeah, that's not the sort of social enterprise we want here.
No.
Not at all. Whilst we're on the subject of metal, I know you've used SelectaDNA to protect metals in various sorts. Can you give us some examples of sort of work you've done around metal theft?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, if you pick the metal, and you can pick a product that will do it. But I suppose essentially we're looking at perhaps our grease product, the grease product which would be used around war memorials, those type of tributes under lead flashing, copper roofs, any of those kinds of things. We have another product which is really aimed at the kind of rail industry and is used by the rail industry for protecting cable. But if you've got cable in whatever business, it will still protect it. And again, with the product for the cable, there is an instant identification element with that, which is very, very useful to the police. If you stop somebody at the roadside, you know whether they should have that or not within a very short time.
Okay. So you mentioned rail. You've worked with British Transport Police for take it, yeah?
Yeah, we work with the British Transport Police. I've talked to the British Transport Police quite regularly. Obviously, metal theft for them is a huge problem because if the cables have gone, the train stops running. And it's a knock-on effect because if you're looking at particularly London, if a train's coming into London and you've got various people going to various businesses, the work doesn't get done that day. And if you've got the wrong people on the train, money starts to come off the economy. It's bigger than just that initial theft because it's that knock-on. It's also a safety issue as well.
Yeah, it's so as well as the rail industry, it's telecoms, other utility companies that can benefit from marking cable and other forms of metal. We supply product to the telecoms industry for marking batteries. There's very big problems around theft of batteries from the roadside cabinets. So we mark batteries both in the UK and abroad. We've done quite a lot of work, in fact, in the Caribbean around marking batteries for telecom companies. And probably a good time to bring in the additional resource that we can provide police forces, which is a search dog. So in conjunction with Search Dogs UK, we have the ability to search for SelectaDNA marked property or vendors that have been marked with SelectaDNA products through a search dog. And when you're talking about metal theft and going into a scrapyard and trying to find stolen metal, traditional methods of finding forensic markers are with a UV light, which works fantastically well, but in a scrapyard that's going to take a couple of officers at least a day. And even then, they're not going to be able to find a marked item of metal that's at the bottom of a big pile. Whereas a dog works in 3 dimensions, so can carry out a similar search in a fraction of the time. And it's a really useful resource. In fact, up here in Cheshire, Jazz the search dog was used on Monday this week, the launch of Operation Shield, whereby Cheshire Police have purchased a few thousand of our SelectaDNA kits to give out to members of the public in areas where there's a particularly high burglary rate. And the search dog was used on Monday to go around cash converter stores and for some warrants to see whether she could find some marked and stolen property. So it's a really useful tool for the police to have at their disposal.
That's an impressive one as well. So I believe that service is unique to your organisation?
Yeah, that's right. So it's from what we understand, the first and only forensic marking search dog in the world, which we're quite proud of.
Wow.
But as I said, thanks to Search Dogs UK, and Jazz's trainer is Mick Swindles, who is an ex-Lancashire Police dog trainer, who came up with the idea, and full credit to him for that.
Jazz is on extra treats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned Operation Shield here in Cheshire, which is your latest venture with police forces. And again, I have some knowledge of that. I say covering specific areas within Cheshire, to target communities, to reassure the community. And as part of that, there is a massive marketing campaign. And that will be out in the community, and it's similar to, I suppose, the campaigns that have been run in neighbouring forces in Merseyside and Greater Manchester, with the use of billboards and so on. And I think, you know, from my own experience of seeing the billboards in the community, I can see the impact. Particularly there's one in Merseyside, quite close to a place I'm quite fond of at Anfield, and that just, you know, again, it's an older area of the town, lots of terraced houses and whatever, so, you know, there's back galleries and so forth, but perhaps presents nice opportunities for the burglars in the community. So it's really good to have those sorts of messages within the community. And I've been up this morning myself in another part of Cheshire and seen one of the street signs up for Operation Shield. And again, I can see, you know, as you said, the value of the marketing, the reassurance in the community, and I think it is, you know, it's a massive role to play as part of any project to raise the awareness within the community. Do you find your marketing is as impacted in with your business clients, you know, when you know, providing product for businesses?
Yeah, I think absolutely, perhaps to a different extent, but in terms of using the signage that we provide, you know, large, usually FOMAC signs can be metal signs, to go up at entrances to organisations, to go on fencing, you know, entrances to buildings, has a massive effect. You know, I can think of an NHS trust in London that were sort of that bought into the concept not only of marking their property, but to the whole marketing and raising awareness that they were using it, and they went very heavy on the signage to ensure that every site that was protected, you know, you weren't going to miss it. There were signs everywhere, and it had a huge effect on reducing theft, internal theft of property, and as a result, they saw some huge cost savings as a direct result of it.
I suppose coming on to next, really, with thinking about people and perhaps training. Obviously, there's high-end science goes into the product. You know, I mean, you know, the chemical breakdown within those, obviously, you know, that's something for the boffins. But you find when you're talking to frontline officers and staff, that, you know, when you explain how you use the DNA and how it works, do you find that you know, not so much the interest, but the understanding is there? Do you find? You know,
certainly, because they understand DNA, because it's something that they experience a lot with some of these persons in the UK before anything else happens. Their fingerprints, photograph, and that person's DNA will be taken, or a sample of it will be being taken. So they're familiar with it, they're familiar with the whole kind of process. But with this product, certainly the commercial marking and the home marking product, the way of doing it instantly is they contain marker dots. And when the PCs see the marker dot for the first time and realise, I can identify that marker dot, I can make a call on the radio, somebody can look it up for me, only the police can do this part of it. And I can be talking to the owner of that property, and I can be asking, should that laptop be in Winslow, should it be in Liverpool? And I'll be talking to the owner and then saying, actually, no, it shouldn't, because, and then they can bring someone in and sort the rest out later. So they get that and they like it, and they like the speed of it, and it allows them to do their jobs.
And that's something that's unique about our product, is the fact that you've got the dual identifiers. So with traditional forms of forensic marking, you had the forensic code in the solution, whereby you needed to take a sample, usually with a scraping or a swab, and that would then need to be sent to a forensic laboratory for analysis, which could take a number of days. So that still exists with our SelectaDNA product, but the additional method of identification that Nick was talking about with the microdots gives the police that opportunity to actually prove that somebody's handling stolen property within a matter of minutes. If they can't find one of the microdots that's on the marked item, then they've got the DNA in the glue to fall back on, which they can take a sample of and send it off for analysis.
I've just noticed there's a request on the screen for introductions again, because somebody's might have to have joined late, so we'll do that now. My name's Andy Williams, I'm National Community Safety Network Director.
My name's Nick Roach, I'm the Police Liaison for SelectaDNA Security Systems PLC.
And I'm James Brown, Managing Director of SelectaDNA Security Systems, the manufacturer of SelectaDNA.
Okay, and we're here today in Chester with today's webinar on reducing the fear of crime. Okay, you mentioned then the microdots within the solution.
Yeah.
Now, am I right in saying that the microdots are not always suitable for every application, and you can use the solution without the microdots?
Correct. Yeah. So that's absolutely true. So there might be some items like a diamond ring where you wouldn't want, albeit a very, very tiny black microdot, which is around 0.5 millimeter in diameter. You might not want that on a valuable piece of jewellery. So you can actually mark it with just the solution itself, which dries clear, and that still is completely unique to that owner because of the synthetic DNA that's contained within it. But generally for other items, laptops, televisions, tools, machinery, you name it, we'd recommend that you use the full package, which is the DNA with the microdots.
That speeds up the analysis.
Absolutely.
And how is your analysis done once somebody puts a request in? How is that done? Do you do it yourselves as an organisation?
Yeah, so we have 2 partner laboratories that we use for carrying out analysis of SelectaDNA products. So the process would be that the police would take the sample in a very similar way to how they would take a human DNA sample. If it's on an offender, it would be done using a swab. If it's on an item of property, the whole item of property can be sent to us. Or, as I mentioned before, you can take a scraping of the solution. Then Nick can talk about ensuring the chain of evidence and the secure transfer of the sample from the police to us. But then the analysis would take anything up to 5 days for us to identify the SelectaDNA code on the property or on the offender, and then check it against the database to say that code belongs to this individual. But in terms of taking the sample and evidence retrieval, that's something that Nick trains SOCOs and police forces on the whole time.
I mean, they are familiar with the importance of the chain of evidence and the integrity of that chain. So essentially, as James has said, the item or scraping of the item will find itself to me. I'll check that it's sealed and it's correct. I'll pass it on. Then it comes back through me. But when it goes back to the police officer, I might be phoning them beforehand, but when it goes back, they'll have a statement from me covering the continuity. They'll have a statement from the scientist identifying it. My statement will explain how the police officer would have made that link. But it doesn't need to get that far that often because of the microdots. The police officers can do it themselves. But generally speaking, with swabs on the body, the moment criminals know that they've been contaminated and the swab's taken, they need to speak to a solicitor, and then very often there's a change of plea because they are, to quote a phrase, bang to rights.
And you can't get it off once it's on. I mean,
it will wash off, but it is a slow process. I've got some on me that's probably about a week old, and I do wash. But it takes a while, and if you then get it into areas that we're not very good at washing, if you have some on your hands, particularly with the grease or the gel, and you scratch your ear or nose or sort of different parts of your head, different parts of your body that don't wash that well, it's there for even longer. And on clothing, it survives several washes. On footwear, because we don't wash our shoes, almost indefinitely.
It's still there. Obviously, the key thing for agencies who've invested is to make sure they're checking, make sure they're screening it and all the lights. Now I know as part of the policing operations that you've run, they screen people, offenders coming into custody to make sure that that anything is picked up under the UV lights. So it is keen. I know earlier on you did show me your hand. If you could just after the camera just show now under the torch your hand.
We can't see it, you're looking.
Yeah, you might be able to make that out. It's
if we do a comparison of sort of that's the hand that haven't got any. And that's the hand that has.
Yeah. So it's particularly in police custody areas where the natural lighting is dimmed or turned off completely, and then the UV lights come on. It would look like a Christmas tree.
And I haven't seen it in police custody suites. That's exactly, it's a separate room. Go in, the UV light comes on, and they can see that they're well lit up, and there's no denying.
Yeah, and it has a power with people who've come into custody and don't have any, because they then go and tell their friends that they are looking for this, and that just rolls on and on and on.
And again, that's probably also part of the marketing message, isn't it? You know, like the checks are being done, so you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
Say, you know, if you have handled any stolen goods or you have been in contact with the solution in any way, then you go into custody, you will be screened, it will come up, and it can be traced back to where and what you've touched, where you've been.
That's right. Yeah.
And obviously can provide evidence for any prosecution. So, can you tell us, I mean, we were chatting earlier off camera, you tell us about some of the more interesting things that you've marked. Could you just,
I think the most interesting thing, this is part of a project that we're working on at the moment. Yeah, the most interesting thing I've done recently is sheep. I've marked 20 sheep in a number of different places on the bodies to see where the best place is, horns and hooves and various other places. And we're going to go back in the future with the dog, as we mentioned, and I'll go back with the UV light and see what I've done. But I'm confident of the things I've previously marked to think that it's going to be there.
So this is a test case, is it, with the sheep?
Yeah. I mean, it's been done on goats, and I know, I didn't mark the goats, but I know somebody who marked goats, and that's been there now over a year. So in the case of sheep, we don't know. There's a lot of unknowns with animals, but I'm confident it's going to be there.
But there have been a number of police forces now in the UK that, with large rural areas, that have used the product to mark livestock and even, you know, talking about strange items that have been marked. We were talking about beehives earlier, and I guess it's anything that's got a high value, and I certainly wasn't aware of the sort of value that is associated with beehives, but we've successfully marked and protected a lot of beehives in some rural communities as well. But yeah, it's amazing the range of items, and it all comes back to, you know, what I just said. Anything of value, anything that's easy to then sell on becomes a target, and we can assist with pretty much anything with this product in terms of marketing and protecting it.
All things considered.
Yeah, I say to police officers, you know, you are limited by your imagination as to what you could do with this. There's not that much that it won't harm.
And obviously, you put it on your skin, so there's no sort of health hazard with it. You know, it's I don't know if it was ingested. No,
you know, it's a non-toxic inert substance. If it was ingested, within the instructions there's guidance on what to do, which is the standard sort of drink plenty of water and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's not a harmful liquid in any way, which is very important when it's going out to households and for domestic use.
So it'd be more of an irritant to say get shampoo in your eye.
Yeah.
Not that I need to worry about that, obviously. But say you just do that. Yeah. All right. Okay, well that's really good. You mentioned you've worked with organisations. Can you give us an example of maybe good successes, you know, across the country, or maybe even abroad, because you mentioned abroad? Yeah,
probably one that springs to mind. If we're sort of focusing on the domestic burglary angle, we had a really successful campaign in the north area of Manchester with GMP, and that was a 1,000 home site that had a fantastic take-up of the kits, because you've got to remember that when police are handing these kits out, you know, you don't always get homeowners that want to take them for various reasons, or people might not be in when you're distributing the kits. But there was a fantastic take-up of well over 90% of the kits, and in a 12-month period it resulted in 83% reduction in burglaries in that estate, which was fantastic, you know. And that's a figure that we often quote. That was one of our best schemes. But in terms of domestic burglaries, anything between 40% and 85% reduction in the area that's been targeted is quite normal. But that was one great success. We've we've done a lot of work in the last 18 months, 2 years with West Midlands Police, and there's been some fantastic results in that area. And sort of moving slightly away from domestic burglaries, but robberies, where we've supplied now around 50 of our spray systems to the post office, mainly in the northwest in the Merseyside area. And these sites, that was chosen because it was a real hotspot area for robberies, and we're now 2 years down the line, and the original 20 sites that were protected, none of those have been targeted. And again, that's in conjunction with the signage to say this post office is protected with a DNA spray. So the power of it is phenomenal, but as we've mentioned, it's all around making sure that people know you're using it.
So where are you saying those 20 haven't, were the offences displaced to outside of that area, or do you not know?
I think it had a positive effect not only on the area of the 20 sites in Merseyside, but further afield in Merseyside and surrounding force areas as well. But I don't have information as to where that was displaced to at all. You know, I think what we've seen with other crime types is that if criminals sometimes, you know, in this case, see that robberies are suddenly going to become a hard target, they might move over to metal theft or, you know, something like that. So it might have displaced it into a completely different area.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I think that's the sort of added value, isn't it, from the market, if it has a knock-on effect into areas that haven't been covered.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, yeah, again, it's the messages for the community.
Interestingly, around those post offices, when I looked at the crime maps after they've been put in, you working within the postcode, just around it there was no crime because that's the post office, and then around that there's an area where crime has gone down because people who might have been going to the post office to target the post office itself aren't passing through a local area, so they aren't coming in crime that might just come up something that's been offered to them on the way. So it has an effect there. And I met a lady in Liverpool who'd been sprayed by accident, they set it off inadvertently, but she didn't know she'd been sprayed. So if you don't know you've been sprayed, you won't go to the trouble of washing, excessively shaving your hair, getting rid of clothing. Very effective.
You mentioned then shaving your head. Have people done that, have been sprayed?
I know from a sort of police background, some people who have been very sort of forensic aware, who would burn clothing, shave their head, but for some bizarre reason they will never get rid of their trainers. And it's
too expensive.
And it goes everywhere. So always look at the shoes. Yeah.
Could you just, for people who perhaps aren't aware, explain how the commercial pack works, the spray? Could you just...
The spray can be fitted to an existing burglar alarm. It doesn't need a burglar alarm, but if it's fitted to an existing burglar alarm, it can be used out of hours where business is closed. But when the business is open, it can be set off in a number of ways. You could have it set off with a panic alarm, where you have to press 2 buttons. It's 2 buttons instead of 1, because making sure that you're not setting it off by accident. So you could be a very overt act, but some people might not want to be seen to do that. So it could be money in a till that's taken out, and when the money's taken out, contacts are made, it arms the PIR. So as you go out, you go spray. It could even be built into a product that sits on the shelf, not to be stolen, not to be sold, but if it was snatched or stolen and thrown into a bin liner as it goes out the door, it would arm the PIR before it goes to that door and spray the person as they leave. Again, providing that evidence.
And they wouldn't know they've been sprayed?
No.
So if it was, if your face was bare and it came over your head, you're not going to feel it?
It comes down as a kind of an aerosol, like an aerosol, just like a deodorant spray.
So you wouldn't.
Yeah, it's almost like a fine mist, isn't it? And with all the adrenaline pumping.
So if I'm a business owner and I want to protect all my business and I want a spray, but I also want some paint on solution as well, it's all the same batch, it's all unique to me.
It's all unique to you. The codes would be different.
Right.
but they would go onto our database. So you as a business owner would have, let's say, 2 codes associated to that particular site. One of the reasons that we do that, particularly for the spray, is that should there be an activation, you're required to put in a different code to the spray system. And the real reason for that is so that if it does go to court, you're able to say the only time that the system sprayed with that code on was at 2:30 on this particular date. So that individual, must have been the one that robbed that store. So if that happens, then you need to replace the canister. So yeah, on the database you can have as many SelectaDNA codes associated to one business, or it wouldn't be an individual, but a business or a school or whatever it might be.
So obviously that can be used in evidence in court. Have you got any examples where someone has been sprayed and gone to court?
I don't think there's any in the UK, which kind of, from my point of view, says that it works because people don't like the signage. But we got a conviction in New Zealand, and it's 6.5 years for an armed robbery, where the evidence that convicted him, put him at the scene, was spray evidence.
Yeah, there seem to be quite a few cases in Northern Europe. We've got distributors in 35 countries across the world now, but quite a big footprint from sort of, in Central and Northern Europe, and there's been a number of convictions, both from spray systems, but also from transferable markers, which are usually used by the police, that are not always used by the police in operations to, in fact in the UK, police use our transferable gel to mark a piece of bait in a trap car, for example. So there's been a number of convictions around the use of that product as well.
You mentioned if the canister's been used, you then need to have it replaced or reloaded. What's the process for that? Is it reloaded or replaced?
Each canister it's an entire sort of unit. So one goes out, one goes in. You aren't contaminating the housing. It's not passing through the same nozzle. That would be completely unique to that canister. So there could be no suggestion at any point that somebody has come into contact with it inadvertently. And it's really important that they are replaced and the procedures for making sure that happens, because it's crucial evidence. Because these canisters are completely unique. The code won't be repeated ever in any way in any country, because of the way it's formulated, and that's the sort of evidence that the police need, and that's the sort of evidence that really frightens criminals, because there's no way of explaining it.
But it also means that there's no, as Nick alluded to, there's no piping or anything like that needs to be changed. It's literally a case of switching the system off, removing the casing, taking the canister out, and then putting a fresh one in. The nozzle is, as Nick said, is incorporated in the actual canister itself, so it's a matter of seconds to change a canister, which is usually carried out by the alarm installer that's fitted the system.
Well, it is best to have a professional.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you've got plumbing, you get a plumber, and you don't. So it's that type of thing, isn't it? Yeah, right. Okay, that's really useful to know. I think it's useful to explain sort of the intricacies for the listeners, because obviously, I think the message is getting out into the community now. Obviously, I was previously aware of your organisation and of the work, aware of DNA solutions. I think it is useful for people to know the sort of the detail and what sort of services are available. Interestingly, you've mentioned Europe and your global footprint now, obviously, as your organisation has grown. Question for you first. To go to the Caribbean and all these places.
I'm working on the Caribbean. I've managed France once, looks like I'm going to go back again. I'll distribute in Barbados. He's quite keen on going and help him.
You volunteer?
Yeah, absolutely. He said he's a slow learner. It'll take a few weeks.
Especially on camera. But you've mentioned the Caribbean and you've mentioned Europe. mean, sort of, you said 35 countries, was it?
Yeah, a number of those are in the sort of the early phases of development. And if you look at the UK, we've got quite a mature, certainly compared to other countries, we've got quite a mature market when it comes to forensic marking. So forensic marking in the UK has been around for probably over 20 years. But these countries where we're supplying products into through our distribution network now, it's brand new. So they're really starting at the bottom, and they're training the police. Often police forces. I think in the UK, crime prevention is quite unique. If you're looking further afield, it's quite unique as a country that we police force in the UK focus on crime prevention, because certainly other European countries that I've visited, police don't really get that part of it. They're there to solve crimes, but not ensure that crimes aren't committed. So yeah, our distributors are having to train police forces on the product to make sure that they know what to do with it and how to deal with it should they come across it. Partnering with local forensic laboratories, translation of our database and website and so on. So there's a number of aspects that need to be put in place that can often take 12 months before they actually start selling products. But yeah, so there's a number of countries now that are starting to see some nice increase in use of the product, and in Scandinavia there's countries where the police forces are recognising that this is actually going to be a very good tool for them to use and to promote.
So you contacts at the moment mostly abroad are with police forces who are taking it on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of where it is being used in countries abroad. Is it commercial or domestic use? Or?
It varies, but talking about Scandinavia, for example, in Sweden there's already quite high use of the product for domestic properties, and so much so that the product's being offered in large retail outlets for members of the public to buy kits and to protect their property. But it's a mixture really, so it's protecting homes and businesses, and all the other organisations that have got valuable property, so across education, and often what we find, and you'll know this better than us, but those sort of sites that have got open access like universities and hospitals is where the product can offer great value, because those are the sites that are very difficult to police and ensure that you haven't got thieves coming onto the premises.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned France next, so what's the sort of take-up in France? What's the
thing I went to France to do is it's kind of something that's in development. It's kind of, in its simplest way of putting it, I suppose, it's paintball technology meets DNA technology. It's a system for marking offenders at public order events. The gendarmerie are very interested in it. I took it there. They played with it. They've used it. They think it's quite effective. And I mentioned that we have a dog that can find it, and they got very excited about that. So the next visit will be with the dog, so that they can make sure that works. And I think that they could be the first people to start to use it on mass, because it would have such a large effect. If I can sort of put that into context, when I was still in the police, I lost staff who were doing their day job, so like the rest of my staff had to carry on, and they went off to investigate the post-riot scenarios, and they were saying all these people are lying. Well, perhaps quite a lot of them were, but some of them really were not at that event, and public money was being put into investigations to try and say you were there because the CCTV looks like you, and it would be very easy to say, yes, you put a mark on you, you were there, thank you very much, or no, you haven't, thank you much for your time, move on to to sort of more worthwhile investigation. So yeah.
And Nick's been quite modest there. He's not mentioning the fact that he's been on the One Show.
Oh yes, I've forgotten.
Yes. And they did quite quite a long feature on the tagging device for riots and public order offences, where they brought in the search dog as well, and so Nick was the star of that 10-minute feature.
When was that?
This was, well, we filmed it. It was filmed in kind of January, but I don't think it went out to, was it last June, something like that?
So, yeah.
It's still available on iPlayer, that is.
If anybody's really interested, I might have a copy.
Right. Oh, very good. It's just what you're saying about France, and you're saying about the sort of the paintball meets SelectaDNA. So I take it the gendarmerie, I think obviously paintballing people as they're within a public order situation, and then be able to catch up with them later.
The product, to all intents and purposes, it looks like a paintball, but unlike a paintball, it wouldn't have paint. It has a clear liquid, so if it hit you, you wouldn't know.
Well, you'd feel it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I had the sort of the experience when I was a sergeant, I got hit by a piece of concrete, and I thought it was a tennis ball because it hurt about that much. But I think if you've got enough adrenaline, you might not know. But you might, but you won't see it. You'll penetrate clothing, go directly onto the skin, and identify somebody as being there or not being there.
Obviously, if it's anything like a paintball, it's on the main body mass area, you're not going to feel it's at the head.
Yeah.
Because obviously the officers will be trained not to shoot from that.
Absolutely.
You know, so it's obviously to make for that, and it'd be quite interesting to see that as a case study, to see if it takes off in France as as an initiative.
Yeah.
I think the UK police force is very interested in that.
But if you can use it as a deterrent, in the police have these, they're now going to deploy them. It's now time to go home. Don't use it. For me, that's success.
Yeah. Because, like you say, I suppose there's been many right situations and public order situations throughout the years where people have been swept up in it wrongly, but also people who've managed to wriggle out of being involved because there was no absolute concrete proof, and the CCTV probably wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite clear enough. Yeah, that's a very interesting one.
Yeah, it's a nice option for the police to have, and it's certainly not as expensive as water cannons.
No, but I don't think they'll be coming in here.
Yeah.
No time soon. But it's really interesting to see how things are taking off sort of on a global level now, and for different countries. Is it? You mentioned Scandinavia and Europe, is it mostly the sort of what we'd call the developed world, or are you moving into sort of far-reaching areas as well? Are you sort of any sort of developing countries interested, or are they not quite ready yet?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about the property marking product for domestic use, for domestic burglaries, then you're right, that kind of only really translates to Northern Central Europe. But then solutions to mark cable or batteries, translates really well to other countries, to in Central America, places like Guatemala and Costa Rica and Nicaragua are using the product to prevent metal theft. So there are some types of crime that sort of work all over the world, I think. But in terms of like the individual kits for domestic burglaries, even Spain probably it doesn't translate that well, because there's a history of using metal bars on windows, which we don't get here. So there's different types of protection that some countries use for domestic burglaries.
It's just interesting, hopefully the listeners find it interesting to see how sort of far-reaching the product, the technology had moved on. Particularly in my time in community safety, to see now, it's global. Obviously, there are some sort of real benefits for UK, and for I think it's now an integral part of crime prevention work. The technology is there; it needs to be deployed. There's the marketing aspect as well, that sort of into the psyche of the offenders, for reassurance. And I think, you mentioned before, sort of your public access buildings. I mean, they're really the most difficult to protect, because a building that's sort of locked up and if you like user access only, authorised access only, is a lot easier to maintain. But your libraries, your schools, who will carry masses of technology, IT kit and so on, need to protect that stuff. And again, obviously, the product then would be able to be used to protect, I don't know, all the computers in the library or stock, that type of stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And talking from a cost perspective, if you could, a small primary school, if they've got, probably would say 100 valuable items of electronic devices that they want to protect, it's £99. Whilst that's, it comes out of their budget, when you're talking sort of £1 per item to protect really valuable items, without any ongoing fees as well. So it's a one-off cost. They buy the kit and that's it. They're protected for the lifetime of whatever's marked.
Because I mean, the lifespan of it on a piece of, say, I don't know, a computer is
indefinitely. It's for the life of that item. Over the last two years or so, the first certification for the durability of forensic marks has been devised and published, and that's something called PAS 820. And as I say, it assesses how durable a forensic code is, both indoors and outdoors. And you've got 3 classifications, so you've got grade A, B and C. And grade A relates to 5 years, either internal or external. And we're proud to say that SelectaDNA has got grade A external for PAS 820, which is the highest standard that it could possibly get. And that's not to say that it will only last 5 years. It's to say that it's been tested up to 5 years, and it withstood external exposure, which exposes it to both sunlight and to moisture to replicate rain and all sorts of environmental conditions. So
indoors or outdoors, it's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I'm a homeowner and I buy some solution, I paint all, I don't know, my TV, my DVD player, my camera, and phone, whatever. Effectively, what you're saying is that this solution is going to outlive the life expectancy of the piece of kit.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, it's going to, I don't know, exhausted itself and I've had to replace it or whatever. What if say my phone, and then I sell my phone? What happens then with your database and the solution? How can you transfer or?
Yeah, and so not only can you transfer an item, but it doesn't cost anything to do that. So one of the nice aspects of the database is that if you buy a home kit to mark 50 items, you register the kit online, and then you get 50 lines where you can actually enter the 50 items that you've marked. And the benefit of that is not only that in the event of a burglary, you can actually check back and have a domestic asset list of all the items that you marked. But as well as that, you can actually, as you say, if you do sell an item, you can tick a box against that item on the database and say this has been sold on and it's gone to this particular individual. So whilst the code on that item will still link back to your name and address, there will be a note against that record saying this particular item with that code has been sold on.
So obviously then if that item is then stolen, Nick as the police officer, when he looks on the system, on the microdots, he can say, okay, it was Andy Williams, but he sold it to James Brown on the 20th of the 3rd, whenever.
Exactly.
Exactly. So I don't need to wake you up at 2:30 in the morning.
You'd have to know plan. Yeah. Well, obviously that's a real concern. People are saying that's good stuff. I mean, I mentioned phones. I mean, the thing is, I suppose nowadays, and I find this in my own way, but people are very lax with phones because they're insured. They're often insured to the bank, or the insurance company always sort of, just get them lost, so they're not bothered that it's stolen. They don't always get reported. But I think it's important that we encourage people to actually protect their phones, use the sort of technology on them, because more than likely that phone is then stolen and used in criminal activity, and it has further impact within the community.
Absolutely.
Other than, oh, I've lost my phone, but it's okay because I'm going to get a new one, the insurance. So I think that's that's a good message for us, as professionals to be getting that. That's good. Okay. Well, we've obviously covered a lot of the topic areas now around discussion around the technology. Happy to open it up for questions now from people tuning in. And if you've got any questions, if you want to type them in, and then I'll put them to the panel, and so we'll see if we get you the answers you're looking for. So in the interim, obviously, we'll carry on with our discussion. Okay. Right. So I suppose a bit of a low-ball question here, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Why should NCSN members then use your company? Why? I mean, there are, as we say, there's other colours available.
Yeah.
You know, what's your, maybe like your unique selling point for our members, for our organisations?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when we speak to police forces, local authorities, what they generally look at is whether a product, in this case a forensic marker, has secured by design accreditation. So that's often the first port of call to check whether it's a police preferred specification. And then after that, in terms of what we can offer, we've mentioned the fact that our product has the dual identifier, so both the DNA and the microdots, which is, from a police perspective, incredibly important, and it allows the police to prove ownership of an item without having to bail a potential offender. And one of the other big aspects is the fact that, which I mentioned just a short time ago, when we sell product either to the police or direct to individuals or direct to schools or businesses, it's a one-off cost. So an individual or an organisation would buy the product, and they don't have to worry about any ongoing fees, which do exist with other suppliers. And then probably from my perspective, the third aspect is around the name of the product, and that's the end of it. You know, the last three letters, DNA. DNA is a massive deterrent to crime, to criminals. You know, even before SelectaDNA came around, criminals were afraid of DNA and the power that it gave police to convict them. And anything that's DNA protected or marked with SelectaDNA immediately becomes a very hard target.
So be really unfair now, Nick. As a police officer, if you put yourself back in that role, for you the benefits of Selecta are?
For me, it's the instant ID. I have sat across a table not unlike this, with a tape machine running, with a laptop sitting in the table like mine there, in a police evidence bag, knowing it's stolen. But it's no good me knowing it's stolen. I've got to be able to prove it's stolen. Now, if that means I've got to bail that person for maybe 2 weeks to make inquiries about the laptop, get somebody to maybe get me into it to find the owner of it, that person is going to do several things. The thing they're supposed to do is supposed to come back in 2 weeks' time. That's the thing they're not going to do. Or if they do that, on the rare occasion they do that, they're putting a crime spree or stealing other things because they know they're going to go to prison because of the laptop. Or they just go and hide somewhere. So by the time they're actually found and put you into the justice system, it's lost its impact, it's lost its immediacy, and then I've got to go in and explain to somebody, well, okay, yeah, we know you were burgled, and yes, we did get some stuff back, and yes, we did arrest somebody, but this happened to them, and really, it only happened, that happened, it was such a low sentence, because it was 2 years ago, and people's moved on. And that's a different conversation with somebody, because it won't be about the goods you brought them back, it was about the goods that they sold and we didn't catch.
I suppose really it's the speed, isn't it? You know, so you've got your suspect, you can check straight away, and then then you're able to prepare charges straight away. Whereas, as you say, they're released on bail, they don't turn up. They go and commit more offences because we're going away anyway, so we might as well fill our boots. And the thing is, I think then there's obviously a cost to the police force, you know, for officer time there to try and find them. They're under warrant, they've got to find them, someone's got to execute the warrant. And I think there's the cost in the community there as well, because that damage.
With all those other victims.
That corrosive effect is still going on, because it's, you know, it's common theory, isn't it? If they've stolen one thing, they'll steal something else.
So you can take them out of that environment on that occasion. They can't once they're on remand, they then can't commit any further crime.
Well, it's really interesting. As I say, it's I suppose it's the bigger picture, isn't it? And it's how this, it's we've talked about the prevention element, because also it's a reduction in damage in the community, because obviously if somebody's apprehended and they're covered in the DNA solution, it's on the products they've stolen that you've recovered. She's stopping that offending at that point, so they're able to fair charges. You're removing that.
That's right. It's difficult to quantify what somebody might have gone on and done, but I think it's fair to say, looking at various people's history, they would have gone on to do something. It's just a question of what. So
that doesn't change it.
No, absolutely.
Okay. Well, it's good to be able to sort of look at the wider implications, because obviously our members predominantly community safety based practitioners. And not only just considering the policing implications of things, but they have to consider the wider community. They'll have other partner agencies within their community safety partnership who've different vested interests, but all the same ultimate goal, to improve community safety, reducing crime. So it's good to touch on the other implications that the DNA solution can have. You've mentioned a couple of forces. How many forces in total are you actually working with now in the UK?
We've now directly supplied SelectaDNA into 38 of 43 UK police forces.
Only 5 to go.
Yeah, only 5 to go. So, and even those that haven't directly bought the product, we've carried out training to ensure that they understand it and they know what to do should they come across it, because at the end of the day, even though they haven't bought it directly, there'll be hundreds of individuals, schools, businesses in their force area that are actually using the product, and not only that, but surrounding forces that are using the product. So even if they're not actually investing in it, they need to be aware of what to do should they come across it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because obviously if you've got a neighbouring force is not using the technology, your force introduces it, then it may be that your criminal fraternity will cross the border and go and offend on your neighbouring force, which won't surprise you. No, it does happen.
No, absolutely.
So it's lucky for this area that most forces seem to be using.
But just because that particular force isn't using SelectaDNA, it doesn't mean to say that they're not using one or other of our other products. Just they may not have the need. And some forces are some of the forces that are very specialised. Perhaps the Ministry of Defence Police, Nuclear Fuels Police wouldn't have a community, so that wouldn't work for them. Albeit the Ministry of Defence Police do use it.
So you obviously you're covering quite a lot of ground in the UK as well now. You mentioned so the police force or the organisation has it, and you mentioned you offer your support, you offer training. Did you get? Is there a lot of calls for further training once you've done your initial training? Is there a requirement for that? Is that something you provide?
Yeah, every now and again I find myself going back to places that I've been to previously, because they've got a very large operation and it wants a large force. They want to go get the message out there. Or people have moved on. Staff have moved on. They've always been put into a new unit, and they want to make those people aware, or they want to make specialist officers aware.
There's also the training in how to.
The other thing that I do quite regularly is I go to speak to the College of Policing, where crime prevention officers are being trained to sort of make them aware about forensic markers on our products, and how they might be able to use them and how other people have used them successfully. And I think I probably said it during this conversation that I felt you're only limited by your imagination. I spoke to a lady from one of the islands of Scotland, and at the end of it she came up to me and she said, "Could I mark lobsters?" And it takes 30 minutes to dry. How long can you keep a lobster out of the water? I don't know. So she went away, and she came up and said, "Yeah, you could do that." And then she explained to me that there was lobster thefts going on from lobster fishermen, and it was suspected that one fisherman was stealing from another. She said it's a very remote and slightly wild community. She said the shooting hasn't started yet, but it will. and fortunately, we didn't actually have to use this because this particular individual got himself arrested for something else. But you could have used it.
So you could mark lobsters.
So I'm waiting for the second call so I can take answer with speed and integrity. Yeah, you can mark lobster.
So you already checked that out.
Yeah.
So obviously, any sort of animals in the water need to be able to stay out of the water for 30 minutes in order for the solution to dry.
And I know it will last in the water because Dorset Police have some under their police launch, which sits in water for most of the year at Poole Harbour. And it's been on there about 3 years, I think. And the guy there tells me when it comes out of the water, they give it a bit of a wipe over, check the hole. So wipe the algae away, put UV light on it, and so you can see it's still there.
Salt water and the algae.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Right. Okay then. I say I've opened the lines up now if people have got any questions. So you can type your questions in and I can put them to James and to Nick if you wish. Okay. So working with the police forces, obviously, is a key part of your business model. And as you mentioned, you've got 38 out of 43, which is a very impressive number. Would you, I suppose, when you initially go into a police force, is your initial contact with the sort of the crime prevention professional? Is it as a sort of a command team level? What's generally the sort of first contact you have with a new force? How's it been?
It depends, doesn't it? It probably depends on the size of the operation. So, for example, with Cheshire, with the latest project that we've been working in partnership with Cheshire Constabulary here over the last 4 to 6 weeks, I think the initial contact was with a DI at headquarters, but a lot of times it's with crime reduction officers, and I know that it's crime reduction officers. The numbers are falling throughout the country, but we still find that information does get disseminated through them up the chain. And if you're talking about extremely large projects, then the first touch point might be with procurement departments. So it depends really, but I think where we found greatest success is where operations and projects have the support of senior ranking officers, and Cheshire's a prime example of that. The last 4 weeks have been extremely impressive in terms of police activity and the launch of Operation Shield. I think well over 1,000 kits now have been distributed in a very short space of time, and I don't think it's any coincidence that the engagement, the enthusiasm, and the level of participation has been so good, because it's got force backing from a very high level. So that's and that also filters through into making sure that the custody suites are refreshing their processes of checking for forensic marks when criminals are brought in.
So I think it's, by our experience in Cheshire, there has been sort of a massive launch, a serious commitment to account to tackle issues previously identified to analysis of crime trends within our area. I know similarly in Merseyside, again, big campaign over there, lots of marketing in the community. And again, was it the same with GMP?
Yeah, no, they had a significant marketing budget, and that was supported very well by the city council as well. And I think as an organisation we're more aware than ever that that budgets are very tight. So it's a case of trying to draw upon different avenues often. Whether it's proceeds of crime, funding or funding from local authorities or whatever it might be. but the more stakeholders that are involved in these type of projects, the more success I think you have, because you've got buy-in from lots of different partnerships.
I think it is. I know, particularly in Cheshire, we looked at other partners to come on board as part of the project. And I know in other areas I've worked, they've done a similar thing. As you say, it is key to get all of the partners. So you've got registered providers, the local authority. I think particularly if it's social housing, who owns that housing stock? Get that agency involved, get them engaged with it, and bring them on. And I find, particularly in other areas of my own work, when I'm looking at new developments, and I'm finding more and more now, I'm asking them to consider, protecting of materials on sites, of materials in use on developments. Obviously, I try and encourage people to shy away from things like metal guttering and water pipes and so on, but we're in use, to be looking to protect that, because obviously it's going to be potentially targeted. So I think it's becoming more sort of an everyday use and everyday sort of process. I think the recognition in the community has grown massively in the last 5-6 years, particularly. And where people, there's greater knowledge, there's greater understanding, and obviously that was the idea of today's webinar, to offer sort of a bit more detailed overview of the products and the organisation and what they do. I think it's useful for the NCSN as a network is looking to support our membership across the country, to be able to obviously pass information on, and yourselves as members, as commercial members of the network. It's useful for you obviously to be able to engage direct with the members. So we have open lines now. If you want to ask any questions, so if you type your questions in, I shall put them to James and to Nick. Thank you. Okay.
But going back to that last point, Andy, I think you're right that probably 5 or 6 years ago, if we were talking to customers or members of the public about forensic marking, they might have said, "Oh, is it like those pens that you used to get to write your postcode on property?" Referring to UV marker pens. Whereas now, more and more often, you explain the product, and they've heard of it, they know about it. So it's definitely becoming a larger part of what not only what police sort of recommend to members of the public to protect their property, but also in everyday life almost. People see signs up at network rail signs up with SelectaDNA or whatever type of product that they're using. So it's in a lot of places that us as people that are involved in the industry, we notice it, because we notice it absolutely everywhere. But even members of the public who are not aware of it, they'll see signage up in all sorts of different places, and relate that back to the product to protect their own homes.
And people who are on the other side of the law, they notice it because they're constantly working. No, I don't like this street because it's got signs, it's got to be listed because I'm going somewhere else.
That's when those messages get out, because they're intelligent networks and
absolutely
are operating very well.
Absolutely, they pass that on to their friends. Don't go to that street, don't go to that estate. They've got this. Don't go to Cheshire. Operation Shields in Cheshire. Yeah.
You mentioned, we were talking about metal theft earlier on, and particularly within Cheshire. Chester itself has a lot of heritage, but Cheshire as a whole has over 5,600 heritage assets and sites. And have you got any sort of experience from background where you protected heritage sites, or you used your kits on any sort of heritage assets? You mentioned war memorials earlier.
There are some lions in Stanley Park in Blackpool. One of them, they're made of lead. I think they're getting on for the best part of 150 years old. It might be more about that, but quite old. One was stolen. The council decided they needed to do something about the others, because of course to replace the fourth lion, this lion is very expensive to get it getting copied and put back. And they used the spray product that I mentioned because it's very easy to apply. So that's on the lines there. They are still there, but that gave them sort of an impetus to say, well, okay, well, what else have we got here? That's kind of, and they then went on to mark or put in grease under stone statues that they thought might be attractive to somebody. Because even paving slabs, old stone pavers or reclaimed bricks are being stolen, and it's all very well going to a reclamation yard and saying, they're my bricks. I know they're my bricks because when you come and talk to me, or with my previous hat on, I'll say, well, how can you prove that brick is yours? Because that's the level brick on it. I need to know you can prove that brick is yours. If it hasn't got your initials on it, if you haven't done this, you haven't done that, why is it yours?
We've also got the likes of Blenheim Palace, Goodwood Estate, using SelectaDNA to protect their valuables and infrastructure. Bewley Motor Museum used the product to mark all their classic and vintage vehicles. So it's more and more it's being considered, I think, as a covert marker for valuable artifacts and paintings and vehicles and that sort of thing.
Well, it seems ideal for that, particularly for artifacts. Say it can't be seen.
Yeah.
So it doesn't devalue the artifact in any way.
Yeah.
And it takes away that a quick win for someone to have nothing to do. It was interesting you mentioned about the sort of the sandstone, and I know we've had the instance within Cheshire of York stone that's being stolen, and it is the heritage assets are being targeted and being stolen to already know. Say if they are being targeted, unfortunately reclamation yards are not sort of regulated anyway as scrap metal dealers are now since the new legislation. So it would be possible to trace it. People don't have to give them addressing when they're selling and whatever. So it really would be quite useful and a massive saving for owners of heritage assets and sites to take it on to mark, because it isn't just the metal that's being stolen now; it is the stone, and that's right. Yeah. Now again, we've had instances, sadly, a couple of years ago within this county of a war memorial being stolen. Massive impact on that community. It wasn't recovered, been melted down, had to be remade, had to be remade in New Zealand, in Australia, and it brought back massive cost, massive impact, social impact in that community. So you're aware of something like that, perhaps could have been protected and could be in the future. So I think it is really that's an angle that is forward, sort of, in my opinion, for a crime prevention perspective. So I mentioned New Zealand again. I know you mentioned New Zealand earlier, and when we were talking about sort of your overseas work, you're saying crime prevention isn't always as developed in other countries as here. But I know in New Zealand it particularly New Zealand, Australia are very sort of pro-crime prevention, very proactive. The police are really on board with it. Now, any work into Australia at all?
Yeah, more so in New Zealand, but we do some work in Australia where we've protected McDonald's stores from robberies, for example. But yeah, what you just said, we've certainly found in Australia and New Zealand, and in the last couple of months, through our New Zealand distributor, we've supplied SelectaDNA to every single school in the country as part of a big operation with the police, and also Bank of New Zealand have sponsored it, I believe, and that's another organisation that we help. So all Bank of New Zealand banks are fitted with our spray systems, which is about 210 branches, I think. And there was talking about an estate out there. There was a very, very challenging estate where they had I think it was something in the region of 30, 40, 50 different ethnic groups in a relatively or comparatively small area, and as a result quite a lot of friction between some communities. and crime rates were very high. And that was the first domestic burglary project that we supplied kits to. It was in Ramwick Park, and that resulted in, I think it was a 60 or 70% reduction in burglaries. But what the police loved about that was it enabled them to go into people's homes and to talk to them, to get out onto the streets, and it did actually bring the community closer together. So there were, you know, it was like a ripple effect. So it wasn't only reducing crime, but it was creating a nicer environment, and it made the residents of that community feel like the police were actually taking quite extreme lengths to ensure that they weren't victims of crime.
Yes, I mean, that's from my own research. I found, you know, Australia, New Zealand really pro, really up on it, really impressive in the way they go about it, and sort of embraced it. It's, you know, you know, they took it literally and taken it forward.
Yeah.
Really good.
In fact, there was an officer in Australia who attended our last conference in London. Came over, and he'd actually done. He'd written a paper on how forensic markers transferred. So whether it's a spray or a gel or a grease product, how you would tell what sort of marks people had on them, whether it was a primary transfer or a secondary transfer, and that was really interesting talking to him. But that's another example of them being very proactive in terms of you know, the way that they approach crime prevention and new types of technology.
Possibly. But you know, the overall you mentioned the Gillian principles. You know, prevention is just cheaper, it's easier if you do it at source, and
prevention is cheaper than cure.
Absolutely. But they're a great engagement tools for the police, but how to you can get into people and talk to people, or elements of the community that you find hard to reach.
I think the key thing is the communication with the community, because I think if you work in our area as a business, then crime prevention is on your radar. You consider, you know, or is that locked, is that so on and so forth. You consider crime prevention measures in your sort of daily activities. If you're not in that sort of area of work at all, it's not on your natural radar. You don't think of it, and this is often what presents the opportunities for opportunistic thieves, is that it's not on people's radar. They don't think of it, and then they knock windows, doors open, you know, and it is often the opportunities presented by, if you like, lack of attention, you know, carelessness by somebody, you know, sort of not thinking, he's not, oh, hang on, will that be secure? Am I okay leaving the car open? It's this sort of type of stuff that, you know, that presents that opportunity, which, you know, the opportunity he sees on that. I'd say, and this, I think it is really important to get it into people's mindsets. And if the conversation starter is the solution, it is the technology, then it opens the opportunity for professionals to have further conversations with the community. We'll perhaps get them involved in alert groups or watch groups, get them engaged in it more, so they're getting more straight messages. Okay, right, well, we're running out of time now, so if you've got any burning questions that you want to put to either Nick or to James, then if you want to type them through now, and we can put the questions to them here today. Okay, I'm saying again, it's I think, I mean, I've been impressed with the product. I'll be quite honest. I mean, been in community safety for a long time, I've been in crime prevention for a long time. I've seen different products come and go, and I think, you know, the evolvement from, as you mentioned, you know, the pens to something like this, you know, that, you know, it's invisible to the naked eye. It comes up under ultraviolet light. It's easy to apply. It's cheap to buy. It has got a proven effect. And it's not just the effect of the kit itself, it's, as we've mentioned, the marketing, those subliminal messages within the community, you know, and getting out. And I think the more sort of agencies we can get to take it on board, and particularly more commercial agencies to start promoting, I think it really is, you know, it's only going to grow. I think it's only to the benefit of our communities, because it is a protected element.
Absolutely, and going back to the topic of the railways, I know Network Rail, when they deployed SelectaDNA on their Anglia route, which is one of their, I think it is their busiest route across the country, they over a 12-month period. They obviously had other elements in place in terms of trying to reduce theft of cable, but they did attribute SelectaDNA as being part of that. It reduced delay minutes by 83% caused by theft of copper. So, and that, I think those are the sort of boxes that the trained operators like to tick, because we read about the huge fines that are involved, where lots of network and operators are penalised for those type of delays. So it's as we've touched upon, it's not only a solution to help domestic users but businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from our organisations like the rail companies, we get complaints from season ticket holders and from customers that there are fines and whatever. So when you look at the cost of actually purchasing the kit to protect it and to stop the theft happening in the first place, it's almost a no-brainer for you. Because you think, okay, I'll spend a couple of quid here, but I'm going to save masses on the way, and keep your customers happy, keep your business running, and I mean, where there's sort of there's been tampering with the rails to remove wires and whatever. I mean, you could end up having an accident.
That's right.
The possible connotations is don't bear thinking about, but so these things can happen. I say it's massive delays.
And there's the the danger to the offenders that are carrying out the crimes. We've seen horrible instances where people have lost their lives from attempting to steal a few meters of copper cable or a few hundred meters of copper cable. So if we can help avoid those instances happening as well, it's well worth it.
People will take massive risks if there's an opportunity there. But I say signage, the solutions in place, then it removes that temptation.
Yeah.
As I say, as we've said earlier, they don't want to be caught. They're looking for the quick win. The payback. I say, so if there's any sort of prevention measures in place and in danger of them being apprehended, then they've got to move on to something else.
That's right.
They will offend, but not there at that time.
Yeah.
So we all fully appreciate we are often displacing the offending, because offenders will offend in a number of different crime type areas, if you like, but say the more difficult we make it in as many areas as possible, that's right. We're moving them away.
And if you push somebody who's expert in one criminal field into another, that's where they start making mistakes. So that's what the OS did, and they're removed. So it is a knock-on effect.
I think you're touching on your last point, Andy. You're absolutely right. We're never. I don't think we're ever naive enough to think that SelectaDNA is the be-all and end-all, and it's the golden ticket. It will form part of a layered approach, and it's making sure that you've got all those layers in place to make that particular crime as difficult as possible.
Well, it's a combination of factors. I mean, very much, I suppose you very much, it sounds like the police, you can never say what we did on this day definitely was the impact on this, or achieve this impact. It's often a combination of things. It could be, I suppose the crude analogy view would be bonfire night for the fire service. It was a really quiet bonfire night, I would imagine, because it rained. The weather will have a massive effect on what sort of a night bonfire night is. And again, there's so many, that's a really crude analogy, as I've said, but there's so many other factors within our environment that will impact on it. But we've just got to make sure that all our business areas are running right, we're using the right methodologies, we're linking things together, we're involving partners, and we all come together to have the outcome that we want for our safer communities. I think your product is a really useful tool in our arsenal. We wish you good endorsement to our members. For them to definitely get in contact with yourselves. As I'm sure you'd be happy to discuss with anyone interested. For them to see firsthand the product in operation.
Absolutely. And just quickly jumping back to when you asked us what are some of the best results we've had, and I remember discussing the GMP 83% reduction in burglaries, and SelectaDNA was the project that they chose to, or the product that they chose to drive through some of those changes. But you've got the police presence that comes with it. So you've got quite a big police presence of them knocking on the doors and giving the kits out. And if some of those offenders are living in that area, they'll see that and they'll be thinking, well, hang on a minute, why is there such a big police presence here? And so it's as we said, there are other aspects that sort of nice knock-on effects of adopting one of these campaigns.
I mean, often offenders will often offend, as you will, in a short couple of mile radius of their own property sometimes, and it may be that an offender is actually having the opportunity to have the solution in their home, and then they can see it firsthand and think, oh, I say again, it's back to planting the seed, getting that realisation, and it's not just as educating our, if you like, law-abiding community. It's educating those members of the community that aren't law-abiding, that are likely to offend, and likely to have that impact in the community. So it's really it's good. Again, running close to time now, so if anybody's got any questions, I advise you to type them in now, and you take the last 5 minutes to put your questions to James and to Nick. Okay, thank you. I think just I think we can start to wrap up really as we're running to our last 5 minutes. So thank you for coming along today.
Thank you.
It's been really useful for myself, and hopefully for the network members. Hope it's been useful for yourselves.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's I think these webinars are really, as we discussed earlier, a really good way for you and commercial members to get messages out there without calling upon local authority staff or police or whoever it might be to take a day out of their own calendar, and they're able to do it at their desk and find out hopefully valuable information that's going to help them in their day-to-day work.
That's the intention that we're going to run. This is the third of this year. We're going to run a series across the year on different topic areas. And obviously, if members of any topic areas of business that would like to be discussed at a webinar, by all means, please advise us via email into the office, and we will be able to look at getting some experts along to discuss those for you. Our next webinar will be in April, and this is going to be on the subject of community engagement. So if there'll be details coming out shortly to yourselves around that, and you can book your place on that. If you've got any questions for that, then by all means, please fire them in advance of that if you want to. If once the webinar goes off here in a couple of minutes today for the fear of crime, if you think of any sort of questions that you wish you'd asked at the time and they come to you later, then don't be shy about sending them through. If you send them through to the NCSM mailbox, we'll get them sent on to James and to Nick, and I'm sure they'll be happy to give you an answer. Again, if you've any interest in exploring opportunities with SelectaDNA, then you can make contact direct with James and with Nick, and I'll give you the details in a moment before we go off. Or you can actually email NCSM and we'll pass the details on for you, and you'll be able to see details of SelectaDNA on the NCSM website. Okay, I think if you wanted to just give you details, if people wanted to jot it down.
Yeah, so probably the easiest way to get hold of either of us is through the sales@selectamark.co.uk email address. Mark it for either myself or Nick's attention. The website is where you can find out more information is selectadna.co.uk, and on there's a police section with what we hope is valuable information for both police forces and local authorities, community safety partnerships. But as Andy said, Nick or I would be delighted to answer any questions, or indeed to come and give a presentation to you and your colleagues if that was of use.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, well, I say we're going to draw to a close now. let's figure that. I don't know if there's any questions coming through. Thanks for attending today. I hope you found it useful and enjoyable. And as I've mentioned, there will be future webinars coming up, with the next one coming up in April, which is around community engagement. For future reference or for any other information, then please contact the NCSM website, and hopefully you'll be able to join us at future webinars. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Thank you.